What if I told you that after the Civil War, the United States Army created 4 all-black regiments and sent them to fight in the most brutal battles on the American frontier, only to dishonorably discharge 167 of them without a single trial? What if I told you these men had the lowest desertion rate in the entire military, earned 18 Medals of Honor, and were still branded as criminals by their own president? What if I told you it took 66 years for their names to be cleared, and by then, almost all of them were dead? August 13, 1906, Brownsville, Texas, just after midnight. The barracks of the 25th Infantry Regiment are silent except for the sound of breathing and the occasional creak of a bunk bed. These are black soldiers recently stationed at Fort Brown, lying in the darkness, with their boots lined up beside their beds and their rifles locked in the armory. Some of them are praying quietly, Bibles open on their chests. They can hear the town beyond the fort walls. Brownsville doesn't want them here. White residents have made that clear every single day since they arrived. The soldiers know that wearing their uniform in town means insults, threats being refused service at restaurants and stores. They know that being a black man with a gun and authority in 1906 Texas is dangerous. What they don't know is that in the next few hours, their entire lives will be destroyed by a lie they cannot fight. Somewhere in the darkness outside the fort, gunshots ring out. 10, maybe 15 shots. Then shouting. Then chaos. A bartender named Frank Natus is killed. A police officer is wounded. The town erupts. White residents immediately blame the black soldiers. They say it was the men of the 25th Infantry. They say they saw them. They say they found evidence. The soldiers wake to accusations. Their officers conduct an immediate roll call. Every man is accounted for. Every man was in his bunk. The rifles are inspected. None have been fired. The evidence is clear. The soldiers are innocent. But evidence doesn't matter when a white town in Texas wants black blood. Within weeks, President Theodore Roosevelt, the same man who rode to glory with the Rough Riders at San Juan Hill, a charge led by black cavalry, will sign an order dishonorably discharging all 167 men of companies B, C, and D of the 25th Infantry Regiment. No trial, no individual investigation, no chance to defend themselves. Just a blanket accusation of conspiracy of silence and a lifetime sentence of dishonor. 6 of these men are Medal of Honor recipients. Some have served for over 20 years. It doesn't matter. They are black. They are accused. That is enough. What happened in the next hours would be twisted, weaponized, and then erased from almost every history book in America. Until now. This is the story they buried. This is your stolen inheritance as the descendants of men who bled for a flag that turned its back on them. This isn't ancient history. This is your history. This affects your life today. The men who were destroyed in Brownsville in 1906 had children. Those children had children. Some of their descendants are alive right now, still carrying the weight of that dishonor, still fighting for recognition that came too late. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the Buffalo Soldiers, some of the most decorated and disciplined units in American military history, were sent to the worst posts with the worst equipment and the lowest pay, yet still became legends. You'll know exactly how the Brownsville Affair turned 167 veterans into criminals overnight through planted evidence, manufactured testimony, and a president who valued white Southern votes more than black lives. You'll discover why it took until 1972, 66 years later, for the Army to admit these men were innocent, and how that admission came only after nearly all of them had died in poverty and shame. And you'll see how this same pattern of service sacrifice and betrayal continues today, with black veterans who come home to find the nation they served still treats them as threats instead of heroes. After this video, you'll never see a military parade the same way again. You'll never hear about American heroism without asking whose heroism was erased. You'll never accept the narrative that everyone who serves is honored equally. Because the truth is, Black service members have been fighting 2 wars since this country was founded. One against foreign enemies, one against the racism of the nation they're defending. This isn't just about soldiers who died a century ago. This is about your grandfather who came home from Korea or Vietnam in uniform and was still called boy. This is about your uncle who served 2 tours and can't get his VA benefits approved. This is about your cousin who got a dishonorable discharge for something a white soldier would have gotten a warning for. This is about a system that has been betraying Black warriors for 150 years and calling it patriotism. Your ancestors wore that uniform. Your uncles fought under that flag. They prayed to the same God you pray to, asking for protection in wars abroad and justice back home. They got one, but not the other. And the reason why has been hidden from you your entire life. Not anymore. Today the lies stop. Today you learn what they did to the Buffalo Soldiers and why they had to erase them from history to keep you from knowing your own power. If your family has ever wondered why military service didn't lead to the prosperity it brought white families, this is your answer. If you've ever asked why Black veterans have higher rates of homelessness, lower rates of benefit approval, and more bad paper discharges, this is your answer. The betrayal didn't start recently. It's been policy since the beginning. Let's go back to where it started and trace the line all the way to today. In 1866, the Civil War is over. 4 million enslaved people are free. The question facing America is what to do with all these Black men who just proved they could fight. Over 180,000 Black soldiers served in the Union Army. They fought in nearly 500 engagements. 40,000 died for a country that didn't even consider them fully human a few years earlier. They proved themselves on the battlefield. They earned respect. They thought that respect would carry over into peacetime. They were wrong. The United States Army makes a decision. They will allow Black men to serve in the regular army, but only in segregated units. Only under white officers. Only in positions where they can be controlled. On July 28, 1866, Congress authorizes the creation of 6 all-Black regiments. 2 cavalry regiments, the 9th and 10th Cavalry. 4 infantry regiments, the 38th, 39th, 40th, and 41st Infantry. Later consolidated into the 24th and 25th Infantry. These units will become known as the Buffalo Soldiers. The name comes from the Native Americans they fought against. Some say it was because of their hair, which reminded the Plains tribes of the buffalo's mane. Others say it was because of their fierce fighting spirit, the way they refused to quit, even when outnumbered and outgunned. The Black soldiers took the name as a badge of honor. The buffalo was sacred to the Plains tribes, strong, resilient, hard to kill. That was them. But here's what they don't teach you in school. The Buffalo Soldiers were set up to fail. They were given the worst posts in the country. The most remote, the most dangerous, the most isolated. They were stationed in the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico, the plains of Kansas and Oklahoma, the mountains of Montana. Places where summer temperatures reached 120 degrees and winter temperatures dropped to 30 below zero. Places where water was scarce and supplies were scarcer. Places where hostile tribes and white outlaws both wanted them dead. They were given the worst equipment, hand-me-down uniforms, outdated weapons, horses that white cavalry units had rejected. Their rations were smaller. Their pay was lower. Their barracks were the most run-down structures on any military installation. And when they died, which they did frequently, their deaths were barely noted in official records. Just another Black soldier gone, another name forgotten. Despite all of this, the Buffalo Soldiers became some of the most effective fighting units in the United States Army. From 1866 to 1898, They participated in over 150 military campaigns. They fought Comanche, Apache, Kiowa, and Sioux warriors in brutal frontier combat. They protected railroad construction crews, mail routes, and settler wagon trains. They built roads and telegraph lines across the West. They pursued outlaws like Billy the Kid. They mapped uncharted territories. They did everything the Army asked of them, and more, and they did it with the lowest desertion rate in the entire military. Think about that. These men were treated worse than any other soldiers. They faced racism from the white officers above them, from the white settlers they were protecting, and from the enemy they were fighting. They had every reason to walk away. But they didn't. The desertion rate for white cavalry units during this period was around 15%. For the Buffalo Soldiers, it was under 5%. They stayed. They served. They believed that if they proved themselves worthy, America would finally see them as equal. Pause and reflect on that for a moment. These men endured conditions that would break most people held themselves to a higher standard than anyone required, and still believed that their loyalty would be rewarded. They were the best soldiers America had, and America treated them like they were disposable. Let me introduce you to some of these men. Not statistics, not nameless soldiers in old photographs. Real men with real stories who deserve to be remembered. Henry Ossian Flipper, born into slavery in Thomasville, Georgia on March 21, 1856. Freed at age 9 when the Civil War ended, his parents valued education above everything. They scraped together money to send Henry to Atlanta University. He excelled. In 1873, Congressman James Freeman, impressed by Henry's intellect, nominated him to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Henry became the first black student to graduate from West Point, finishing 50th out of 76 cadets in the class of 1877. That might not sound impressive until you understand what he endured to get there. For 4 years, Henry Flipper was subjected to what West Point called silencing. No white cadet would speak to him except in official capacity. He ate alone. He studied alone. He marched alone. White cadets tried to force him to quit through isolation harassment and psychological torture. They put trash in his bed. They hid his equipment before inspections. They filed false reports against him. They wanted him gone. He refused to leave. He graduated and was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the 10th Cavalry. He was the first black commissioned officer in the regular army. He served with distinction for 4 years at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and Fort Davis, Texas. He led troops in combat against Apache warriors. He supervised the construction of a drainage system at Fort Davis that's still called Flipper's Ditch and still functions today. He was respected by his men and feared by his enemies. And then in 1881, he was court-martialed on false charges of embezzling commissary funds. The charge was ridiculous. The evidence was manufactured, but the verdict was predetermined. He was found guilty and dishonorably discharged. Henry Flipper spent the next 59 years trying to clear his name. He became a successful mining engineer and surveyor, but the dishonor followed him everywhere. He died in 1940 at age 84, still officially a dishonored soldier. It wasn't until 1976, 36 years after his death, that the Army granted him an honorable discharge. And it wasn't until 1999 that President Bill Clinton gave him a full pardon. 118 years after he was framed, his family finally got justice, but Henry never did. Now, meet John Hanks Alexander. Born enslaved in Helena, Arkansas in 1864, freed as a baby, raised by a mother who believed education was the path to freedom. John attended Oberlin College in Ohio, one of the few schools that accepted black students. He excelled in mathematics and military tactics. In 1883, he received an appointment to West Point. He graduated in 1887, the second black graduate in the Academy's history. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the 9th Cavalry. John Alexander was different from most officers. He genuinely cared about his men. He learned their names, their families, their struggles. He fought for better equipment and rations for his troops. He insisted they be treated with dignity. He taught them to read and write holding classes in the barracks after duty hours. He believed that education and discipline would prove to America that black soldiers deserved respect. He served at Fort Robinson in Nebraska, where the 9th Cavalry was fighting Sioux and Cheyenne warriors who refused to accept reservation life. John led patrols through blizzards and across frozen plains. He lost men to ambush disease and exposure, but he never lost their respect. They would have followed him anywhere. In March 1894, at age 30, while stationed at Fort Washakie, Wyoming, John Alexander died suddenly of a heart attack. He was one of only 8 black officers in the entire United States Army at the time. He never got to see the recognition he deserved. He never got to build the legacy he dreamed of. He served. He led. He died young. And history barely remembers him. Let's talk about the Medal of Honor recipients. 18 Buffalo soldiers received the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. 18 men who went above and beyond in combat, who saved lives, who held impossible positions, who charged into certain death and survived. Let me tell you about just one. Sergeant Emmanuel Stantz, 9th Cavalry, born enslaved in Louisiana in 1843, freed at age 22. Enlisted in the Army in 1866, one of the first men to join the newly formed Buffalo Soldier units. On May 20th, 1870, near Kickapoo Springs, Texas, Emmanuel was leading a patrol of 10 men when they encountered a group of Apache warriors who had stolen a herd of horses. Emmanuel ordered his men to charge. They were outnumbered 3-1. Didn't matter. They attacked. Emmanuel personally led the assault firing from horseback, driving the Apache back and recovering the stolen horses. The very next day, May 24, Emmanuel's patrol came across a wagon train under attack by a larger Apache war party. Again outnumbered. Again he charged. His men followed. They broke the attack, saved the settlers, killed several warriors, and scattered the rest. For these 2 actions on consecutive days, Emmanuel Stantz became the first black soldier to receive the Medal of Honor in peacetime. The citation called him brave, determined, and selfless. He continued to serve for another 2 decades, leading patrols, training new soldiers, and fighting in dozens of engagements. He died in 1887, still a sergeant, never promoted beyond that rank, despite his heroism. Because the Army had a rule. Black soldiers could only rise so high, and no higher. These are the men who built the legend of the Buffalo Soldiers. Henry Flipper, with his brilliance and resilience. John Alexander, with his compassion and leadership. Emmanuel Stantz, with his courage and sacrifice. And thousands more whose names we don't know. Men who rode through deserts and blizzards. Men who fought enemies on all sides, including the racism of their own country. Men who believed that loyalty and service would earn them equality. Men who were wrong, because no matter how much they sacrificed, no matter how many battles they won, no matter how many medals they earned, America still saw them as less than. And when white supremacy needed a scapegoat, it didn't matter that these men were heroes. It only mattered that they were black. That's the lesson of the Buffalo Soldiers. Excellence is not enough. Bravery is not enough. Sacrifice is not enough. When the system is designed to destroy you, it will find a way. And in 1906, in a small Texas town called Brownsville, that system found its way. Hold that thought, because what I'm about to show you next proves they knew exactly what they were doing. August 1906, Companies B, C, and D of the 25th Infantry Regiment receive orders to transfer from Fort Niobrara, Nebraska, to Fort Brown in Brownsville, Texas, right on the Mexican border. This is one of the most prestigious black regiments in the Army. These are battle-tested veterans. They fought in the Spanish-American War. They charged up San Juan Hill alongside Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Riders, though Roosevelt later downplayed their role and claimed his men did most of the fighting. They served in the brutal Philippine-American War, fighting in jungle heat and tropical disease. They have earned respect. They expect to be treated accordingly. They are about to learn a hard lesson. Brownsville, Texas in 1906 is a powder keg of racial hatred. The population is about 60% Mexican, 30% white, and 10% black. The white minority controls everything: the businesses, the government, the law. They run the town like a feudal kingdom. And they do not want black soldiers stationed there. They make this clear immediately. When the 25th Infantry arrives on July 28, 1906, white residents are furious. They see black men in uniform with guns and authority as a direct threat to the racial hierarchy. Store owners refuse to serve the soldiers. Bartenders turn them away. Restaurant workers spit in their food when they do get served. White residents shout insults as soldiers walk through town. The local newspaper, the Brownsville Daily Herald, runs editorials complaining about the soldiers' presence, calling them arrogant, dangerous, and inferior. On August 5th, less than 2 weeks after the 25th Infantry arrives, a white customs inspector named A.Y. Baker claims that a black soldier pushed his wife off the sidewalk. There is no evidence this happened. Mrs. Baker never files a complaint. No witnesses come forward. But the accusation spreads through town like wildfire. White men start talking about teaching these soldiers a lesson. The mayor of Brownsville, Frederick Combe, meets with the fort commander, Major Charles Penrose, and demands that black soldiers be confined to the fort after dark. Major Penrose refuses. His men have done nothing wrong. They will not be punished for false accusations. The tension builds. Days pass. White residents are angry that the soldiers are still walking freely through town. On August 12th, a local bartender named Frank Natus gets into an argument with a black soldier at his bar. The soldier leaves without incident. But Natus tells people the soldier threatened him. Again, no proof. Just a white man's word against a black man's silence. Then comes the night of August 13th, 1906. Just after midnight. The town is quiet. Most people are asleep. Suddenly, gunfire erupts. Between 10 and 20 shots fired rapidly in the streets near the fort. Shouting. Chaos. Windows shatter. Bullets hit buildings. When it's over, Frank Natus, the bartender, is dead shot in the arm and bleeding out. A police officer named Dominguez is wounded. The town wakes in terror. Who fired the shots? White residents immediately blame the black soldiers of the 25th Infantry. They say they saw soldiers running through the streets. They say they heard soldiers shouting. They say it was definitely the black troops. Within hours, the story is set. The soldiers rioted. They shot up the town. They murdered a man. That's the official narrative, and it will never change no matter what the evidence shows. Inside Fort Brown, Major Penrose conducts an immediate roll call. Every single soldier is accounted for. All 167 men of companies B, C, and D are in their bunks or at their posts. None are missing. The armory is inspected. Every rifle is present and accounted for. The rifles are examined. None have been fired recently. There is no gunpowder residue. No warm barrels. Nothing. The evidence is clear. The soldiers did not do this, but evidence doesn't matter. The next morning, white residents and local law enforcement search the area near the fort. They claim to find spent shell casings from Army-issued Springfield rifles. They claim to find clips that match Army ammunition. They claim this proves the soldiers are guilty. But here's the problem. Those casings could have come from anywhere. The Army used Springfield rifles, but so did many civilians. The casings could have been planted. In fact, they almost certainly were planted, because multiple witnesses later testified that they saw white men placing evidence in the streets before the official search began. The mayor demands that Major Penrose identify the guilty soldiers and turn them over for trial. Major Penrose refuses. He knows his men are innocent. He will not hand them over to a lynch mob disguised as justice. The mayor goes over his head. He contacts Texas Senator Charles Culberson and Congressman John Nance Garner. They contact the War Department. They demand action. The Army sends an investigator, Brigadier General A.P. Bloxam, to Brownsville. Bloxam arrives on August 16th, just 3 days after the shooting. He conducts a brief investigation. He interviews white townspeople who all say they saw black soldiers. He interviews the soldiers who all say they were in the barracks. He looks at the planted shell casings. And on August 19th, just 6 days after the incident, Bloxam submits his report. His conclusion: the soldiers are guilty. They conspired to shoot up the town and then conspired to cover it up by refusing to identify the shooters. This is the conspiracy of silence accusation. Bloxam claims that even if not all the soldiers participated in the shooting, they all know who did, and their refusal to name names proves they are all guilty. It's a brilliant piece of circular reasoning. The soldiers say they're innocent. That must mean they're lying. Their insistence on innocence is proof of guilt. There is no way to defend against this accusation. Deny it and you're lying. Admit it and you're guilty. The trap is set. The report goes up the chain of command. It reaches the desk of President Theodore Roosevelt in early November 1906. Roosevelt is facing re-election pressures. He needs Southern votes. He needs to appear strong on law and order. He does not need a racial controversy that might alienate white voters. So on November 5th, 1906, 1 day before the midterm elections, Roosevelt makes his decision. He orders the dishonorable discharge of every man in companies B, C, and D of the 25th Infantry Regiment. All 167 soldiers. No court-martial. No individual trials. No chance to defend themselves. Just a blanket punishment based on Bloxam's report and the assumption that they must be guilty because white people said so. The order specifies dishonorable discharge, not just discharge. This is important. A dishonorable discharge is a lifetime sentence. It means you lose all military benefits, all pension rights, all veteran status. It means you cannot vote in many states. It means you cannot hold public office. It means employers can refuse to hire you. It's a mark of shame that follows you until you die. And Roosevelt gives this sentence to 167 men, including 6 Medal of Honor recipients, including men who served for over 20 years, including men who bled for this country in multiple wars. The discharges are announced on November 6, the 1906 election day. The timing is not coincidental. Roosevelt wants the news to break when it will have maximum political impact and minimum scrutiny. The soldiers are given a few days to pack their belongings and leave the army. Most of them are in shock. They cannot believe this is happening. They served faithfully. They did nothing wrong. They have proof. It doesn't matter. They are black. That's all that matters. Among the discharged soldiers are men whose names should be remembered. Joseph Howard, 14 years of service, fought in Cuba and the Philippines. Willis Jackson, 16 years of service, Medal of Honor recipient. James Howard, 11 years of service, decorated sharpshooter. Elmer Brown, 9 years of service, aspiring to become an officer. All of them discharged. All of them dishonored. All of them sent into the world with a scarlet letter they didn't earn. The black community across America erupts in outrage. Newspapers like the Washington Bee, the Chicago Defender, and the Cleveland Gazette publish scathing editorials. Booker T. Washington, normally cautious in his criticism of white authority, writes to Roosevelt urging him to reconsider. W.E.B. Du Bois calls it a disgrace and a betrayal. Black churches hold prayer vigils for the discharged soldiers. Fundraisers are organized to help the men find work and housing. But nothing changes. Roosevelt refuses to reconsider. The discharges stand, and here's the cruelest part. The soldiers cannot even collect their final pay and benefits immediately. The Army withholds payment for months, claiming administrative delays. Some of the men never receive what they are owed. They are cast out with nothing. No money, no honor, no future. Just the clothes on their backs and a document that says they are criminals. The years that follow are brutal for these men. Many cannot find work because of their discharge status. Employers see dishonorable discharge and assume they are violent or untrustworthy. Some end up homeless. Some turn to manual labor, the only jobs available to dishonored black men in Jim Crow America. Some leave the country entirely, going to Canada or Mexico, where the stigma might be less. A few manage to build modest lives, but they carry the shame and anger with them forever. They know they were innocent. They know they were sacrificed. And they know there is nothing they can do about it. Families are destroyed. Wives leave husbands who can no longer provide. Children grow up hearing whispers that their father was discharged in disgrace, not understanding that it was a lie. The men themselves internalize the shame. Some stop talking about their military service. Some burn their uniforms and medals. Some die early from stress, heartbreak, and despair. And through it all, the official record says they were guilty. History books, when they mention Brownsville at all, call it a riot, not a massacre of reputations. They frame the soldiers as criminals who got what they deserved. But the truth keeps fighting to get out. In 1908, Senator Joseph Foraker of Ohio launches a congressional investigation into the Brownsville Affair. He interviews soldiers, reviews evidence, and uncovers serious problems with the Army's case. He finds that the shell casings could not have been definitively linked to Army rifles. He finds that no soldiers had powder residue on their hands or clothing. He finds that the timeline doesn't make sense. The soldiers couldn't have committed the shooting and been back in their bunks in time for roll call. He finds that several white witnesses gave contradictory statements. He concludes that the soldiers were likely innocent and definitely denied due process. The Senate holds hearings. Soldiers testify. They tell their stories under oath. They maintain their innocence. They present evidence. And the Senate does nothing. The discharges remain. Roosevelt leaves office in 1909, still refusing to admit he was wrong. His successor, William Howard Taft, also refuses to intervene. The case is closed. The men are forgotten. Decades pass. The discharged soldiers grow old. Most of them die in obscurity, still officially criminals, still dishonored, still waiting for justice that will never come in their lifetimes. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. It wasn't until 1972, 66 years after the discharges, that the Army finally admitted the truth. An Army board reviewed the case and concluded that the soldiers were innocent, that they had been denied due process, that the discharges were unjust. The board recommended that all 167 men receive honorable discharges posthumously. On September 28, 1972, the Army granted those honorable discharges. By that time, only 2 men were still alive. 165 had already died. They died dishonored. They died without vindication. They died waiting for America to admit it was wrong. One of the 2 survivors was Dorsey Willis, 86 years old, living in Minneapolis. When he was told that his discharge had been changed to honorable, he wept. He said he had waited his whole life to hear those words. Congress awarded him $25,000 as compensation. $25,000 for 66 years of dishonor. For a lifetime of being called a criminal when he was a hero. For watching his brothers die in shame. That was the price America put on justice. And it was paid only after almost everyone who deserved it was already in the grave. Think about what that means. The United States government knowingly destroyed 167 innocent men. It branded them criminals, stole their pensions, ruined their lives, and then, 66 years later, when almost all of them were dead, quietly admitted it was wrong. No reparations for the families. No monument in Brownsville. No national apology. Just a bureaucratic correction filed away in military records that most people will never see. That is the story of the Brownsville Affair. And that is the story of how America treats black soldiers who serve with honor. But before you think this was just one terrible mistake, let me show you the pattern. Because Brownsville wasn't unique. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a system. And that system is still running today. The pattern didn't start in Brownsville, and it didn't end there either. Every single time black people built something, every single time black people achieved rank, every single time black people proved their worth, the system found a way to tear it down. Let me show you exactly how this worked over and over again, in different places, different years, but always the same result. Let's go back to 1898, 8 years before Brownsville. Wilmington, North Carolina. This city had something that terrified white supremacists across the South. It had a functioning biracial government. Black men held positions as aldermen magistrates and deputy sheriffs. The city's daily newspaper, the Daily Record, was owned and operated by Alex Manley, a black man. Wilmington's black community was prosperous. They owned businesses' property and had political power. In 1898, that was unacceptable. November 10, 1898, a white supremacist mob of over 2,000 men, led by former Confederate officer Alfred Moore Waddell, marched on Wilmington. They burned the Daily Record building to the ground. They murdered between 60 and 300 black residents. The exact number will never be known because they threw bodies in the Cape Fear River and buried others in unmarked graves. They forced the elected biracial government to resign at gunpoint. They installed their own all-white government. They banished prominent black citizens from the city, giving them hours to leave or be killed. And then they called it a revolution. White newspapers across the country praised it as a restoration of proper order. This was a coup d'etat on American soil, and it was celebrated. Among the murdered were men who had served in the Union Army during the Civil War. Black veterans who thought their service had earned them the right to vote, to hold office, to live in peace. They were wrong. Their service meant nothing when white supremacy decided it was time to take back control. The Wilmington Massacre, sometimes called the Wilmington Insurrection by those who want to sanitize it, erased an entire generation of black political power in North Carolina. And it was never prosecuted. Not one person went to jail. Not one person was even arrested. Now jump forward to 1919. Elaine, Arkansas. Black sharecroppers are organizing. They're forming a union called the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. They want fair prices for their cotton. They want to be paid what they're owed instead of being cheated by white landowners who control the scales, the stores, and the accounting. They're meeting in a church in Hoop Spur, a small community near Elaine, to discuss hiring a lawyer and demanding contracts that actually pay them for their labor. These are not revolutionaries. These are farmers who want to be paid fairly for their work. October 1st, 1919. White men attack the church where the sharecroppers are meeting. Shots are fired. One white man is killed. The white community responds with overwhelming force. Over 500 white men, many of them World War I veterans, some deputized by the sheriff, others just vigilantes, descend on the area. They hunt black people. They shoot them in fields, in their homes, on the roads. They use machine guns. They call in federal troops who arrive and disarm black residents. while allowing white mobs to continue their rampage. The death toll is disputed. Official records say 5 white men and 25 black people died. Historians and survivors put the black death toll between 100 and 240. Once again, the exact number is unknown because bodies were dumped in the Mississippi River, buried in mass graves, or hidden in the woods. And once again, instead of prosecuting the white murderers, Arkansas authorities arrested black survivors. They charged 122 black men with inciting a riot. They put 12 men on trial for murder and sentenced them to death in trials that lasted less than an hour each. No evidence, no defense witnesses, just guilty verdicts delivered by all-white juries who deliberated for minutes. Among those arrested were black World War I veterans, men who had just returned from fighting in France, who had worn the uniform, who had risked their lives in Europe for American freedom. They came home to Arkansas and were nearly lynched for asking to be paid for picking cotton. That's the thanks they got for their service. The NASBC-BASP fought for years to overturn those death sentences, and they eventually succeeded, but not before those men spent years on death row for the crime of wanting fair wages. Do you see it yet? Do you see the pattern? Wilmington in 1898, black political power destroyed. Elaine in 1919, black economic organizing crushed. Brownsville in 1906, black military honor erased. Different tactics, same goal. Keep black people powerless. Keep black people poor. Keep black people silent. And use violence, legal or extra-legal, to enforce it. But it gets worse. Because the military didn't just betray the Buffalo Soldiers in Brownsville. It had been doing it all along in ways big and small, in ways designed to break spirits and limit opportunities. Let's talk about what happened after the Spanish-American War in 1898. The Buffalo Soldiers, particularly the 9th and 10th Cavalry, played crucial roles in the Battle of San Juan Hill and the Battle of Las Guasimas in Cuba. They were often at the front of the charges. They rescued white units that were pinned down by Spanish fire. They fought with extraordinary bravery in brutal tropical heat and disease. And when the war was over, and it was time to hand out credit, Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders got all the glory. The Buffalo Soldiers were barely mentioned. Roosevelt later wrote a book about his experiences called The Rough Riders. In it, he downplayed the role of black soldiers, claimed they needed white officers to keep them from retreating, and suggested they were adequate, but not exceptional. This was a lie. Multiple white officers who served alongside the Buffalo Soldiers contradicted Roosevelt's account. They said the Black Cavalry were among the best troops in Cuba, that they held their positions under fire, that they advanced when others faltered. But Roosevelt's version became the official story. The history books repeated it. And generations of Americans learned that San Juan Hill was won by the Rough Riders, not by the Buffalo Soldiers who led the charge. Then came the Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1902, one of the most brutal and forgotten wars in American history. The United States had just taken the Philippines from Spain and decided to keep it as a colony, despite the Filipinos fighting for their independence. The war that followed was vicious. Guerrilla warfare, atrocities on both sides, entire villages burned. Water torture used by American forces. Between 200,000 and 1 million Filipino civilians died, many from disease and starvation, caused by American scorched earth tactics. The Buffalo Soldiers were sent to fight in this war. They fought in the jungle heat, facing malaria dysentery, and an enemy that knew the terrain better than they did. And something interesting happened. Some of the Buffalo Soldiers started questioning why they were there. They saw the racism of white American soldiers toward Filipinos, heard them use the same slurs they used against black Americans, watched them treat Filipinos the same way black people were treated in the South, and some Buffalo Soldiers deserted. Not many, the desertion rate was still lower than white units, but more than usual. A few even joined the Filipino resistance, most famously David Fugan of the 24th Infantry, who became an officer in the Filipino Army and fought against the United States. The Army's response was swift. Deserters were hunted down. Fugan was never captured alive, but his death was announced in 1901, supposedly killed by Filipino bounty hunters, though his body was never positively identified. The message was clear. Black soldiers could question their role, could see the parallels between American imperialism abroad and racism at home, but they could never act on those realizations without severe punishment. Loyalty was mandatory even when the cause was unjust. And here's what connects all of these stories. In every case, when Black people served, when they fought, when they proved their value, the reward was betrayal. The Buffalo Soldiers fought in over 150 engagements and got the worst equipment. They won 18 Medals of Honor and were still denied promotion. They served with the lowest desertion rate and were dishonorably discharged without trial. The pattern is undeniable. Excellence doesn't matter. Loyalty doesn't matter. Sacrifice doesn't matter. The system will take what it needs from you and give nothing back. Now let me show you how they made sure you would never know any of this. Because the physical violence was just the first layer. The real genius of white supremacy was in the cover-up. They didn't just destroy the Buffalo Soldiers' reputations. They erased the evidence. They rewrote the narrative. They made sure future generations would never know what really happened. And they did it systematically, using every tool at their disposal. Let me break down exactly how the suppression machine worked. First, physical destruction, the most obvious method. When the Brownsville Affair happened, the Army conducted its investigation in a way that ensured certain evidence would never see the light of day. The shell casings that were supposedly found in the street, the ones used to prove soldiers were guilty, were never properly cataloged or preserved. The chain of custody was broken immediately. Independent experts were never allowed to examine them. When Senator Foraker tried to investigate in 1908, key physical evidence had mysteriously disappeared from Army storage. Convenient. The soldiers themselves wrote letters, kept diaries, collected affidavits from witnesses who supported their innocence. Much of this material vanished. Some was confiscated by the Army and filed away in archives where it wouldn't be found for decades. Some was lost when soldiers died, and their families, not understanding its historical importance, threw it away. Some was deliberately destroyed by people who didn't want the truth to come out. This same pattern played out in Wilmington in 1898. After the massacre, the new white government ordered the destruction of public records that showed Black property ownership. They burned voter registration records that documented Black political participation. They demolished Black-owned buildings, not just to terrorize the community, but to erase proof that the community ever existed at that level of prosperity. No buildings, no business records, no tax records, no evidence. Just empty lots and stories that white people said were exaggerated. In Elaine, Arkansas, the bodies told the story, so they got rid of the bodies. Dumped in the river, buried in mass graves, burned in some cases. No bodies, no murder count. No murder count, no massacre. Just an unfortunate incident where some Black people rioted and had to be put down. That's how it was written up in official reports. The physical evidence of mass murder was destroyed so thoroughly that we will never know the true death toll. And that was intentional. Second layer, legal suppression. This is where the system really shows its sophistication. The Brownsville discharges were done entirely outside the normal legal process. There was no court-martial, which would have required evidence witnesses, cross-examination, and a verdict beyond reasonable doubt. Instead, Roosevelt used his executive authority as commander-in-chief to issue administrative discharges. Administrative discharges don't require proof. They only require the president's signature. No appeals, no review, no oversight. just an order, and it's done. This legal maneuver was brilliant in its cruelty, because it meant the soldiers had no recourse. You can appeal a court-martial verdict. You can present new evidence. You can argue that the trial was unfair. But you can't appeal an administrative decision by the president. It's final the moment it's issued. The soldiers tried to fight it anyway. They filed petitions. They wrote to Congress. They hired lawyers when they could afford it. Nothing worked. The legal system had been weaponized against them, and there was no counter-move available. The same legal tricks were used everywhere. After the Wilmington Massacre, the coup leaders rewrote the city charter to disenfranchise black voters. They created new rules requiring literacy tests, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses that were specifically designed to exclude black citizens, while allowing illiterate white citizens to vote. These laws were passed by the very government that had seized power through violence. And when challenged in court, judges upheld them. The legal system validated the coup. In Elaine, the legal system was used to criminalize the victims. The sharecroppers who survived the massacre were arrested and charged with murder for defending themselves. They were given show trials where the verdict was predetermined. Their court-appointed lawyers did nothing to defend them. Some literally called no witnesses and made no objections. The trials were designed to create a legal record that said the black defendants were guilty, which could then be used to justify the white violence as necessary law enforcement. It was legal lynching dressed up as justice. And here's the crucial part. For decades, there was no federal law against lynching. None. From Reconstruction through the 1960s, over 200 anti-lynching bills were introduced in Congress. Every single one was blocked, mostly by Southern Democrats, who filibustered them to death. Their argument was always the same. Lynching is a state crime. Murder is a state crime. The federal government has no jurisdiction. Let the states handle it. And then the states never handled it. They never prosecuted. They never convicted. And the federal government shrugged and said, "It's not our problem. This wasn't an accident. This was policy. Keep it at the state level where white supremacists control the courts, and justice will never happen." It wasn't until 2022, let that sink in 2022, that the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act finally made lynching a federal hate crime. 157 years after the Civil War ended. 67 years after Emmett Till was murdered in 1955. The legal system protected lynchers for over a century and a half. And during that entire time, black soldiers were serving fighting, dying for a country whose legal system refused to protect them from domestic terrorists. Third layer educational erasure. This is how they make sure your children never learn the truth. The Brownsville Affair is not in most American history textbooks. When it is mentioned, it's a footnote, a brief paragraph. No names, no details, no context. Just a passing reference that something unfortunate happened in 1906 and was resolved later. Resolved, that's the word they use. As if justice delayed by 66 years is justice at all. The Buffalo Soldiers themselves are barely taught. Most Americans, if they know the term at all, know it from the Bob Marley song. They don't know who these men were, what they did, what they endured, or how they were betrayed. They're not in the curriculum. They're not in the documentaries that get shown in schools. They're not in the museum exhibits that get federal funding. They've been systematically excluded from the story America tells about itself. And when they are included, the story is sanitized. You might learn that Buffalo Soldiers served on the frontier. You won't learn that they were given the worst assignments as a form of punishment and control. You might learn that they fought in Cuba. You won't learn that Theodore Roosevelt lied about their performance to take credit for himself. You might learn that some soldiers were discharged after an incident in Texas. You won't learn that 167 innocent men were branded criminals by a president who needed Southern votes. The story is cleaned up, softened, made palatable. The anger is removed. The injustice is minimized. And students come away thinking that, while things weren't perfect, everyone was mostly treated fairly. That's a lie. The same educational erasure happened with Wilmington, Elaine, Tulsa, Rosewood, and dozens of other massacres. They were removed from state history standards. Teachers who tried to teach them were reprimanded or fired. Textbook publishers who included them were pressured to remove the content. For decades, entire states graduated generations of students who had no idea that white mobs had massacred black communities on American soil. No idea that local governments had participated. No idea that the federal government had done nothing. The ignorance was deliberate. You can't demand justice for something you don't know happened. Fourth-layer media manipulation. The newspapers of the early 1900s were the primary source of information for most Americans. And those newspapers lied, constantly, systematically, with purpose. When the Brownsville Affair happened, white newspapers across the country ran stories calling it the Brownsville Raid, as if the soldiers had attacked the town unprovoked. They printed lurid descriptions of drunken black soldiers firing wildly into homes. They quoted anonymous witnesses who claimed to have seen the whole thing. They never mentioned that the soldiers were in their barracks. They never mentioned that the rifles hadn't been fired. They never mentioned the planted evidence. They just printed the lie over and over until it became the accepted truth. Black newspapers told a different story. The Washington Bee, the Chicago Defender. The New York Age these papers investigated, interviewed the soldiers, examined the evidence, and reported the truth. But their circulation was tiny compared to white newspapers. Most white Americans never saw their reporting. Most white Americans only read the lies. And even many black Americans, especially in the South, where black newspapers were banned or hard to obtain, only got the white version of events. The truth was available, but it was suppressed, marginalized, and drowned out by the volume of lies. This media manipulation continued for decades. When the 1972 exoneration happened, it got minimal coverage. A few paragraphs on page 12 of most newspapers. No front-page headlines screaming, "Innocent men dishonored for 66 years." No national television coverage. No presidential apology. Just a quiet, bureaucratic correction that most Americans never heard about. The lie got massive coverage. The truth got buried. That's how the system works, and it's still working today. How many documentaries have been made about Theodore Roosevelt as a hero, a conservationist, a bold leader? Dozens. How many mention that he dishonorably discharged 137 innocent black soldiers? Almost none. How many history channels, streaming services, and educational programs celebrate the Rough Riders, all of them? How many tell the story of the Buffalo Soldiers who actually led the charge? Very few. The media decides what gets remembered and what gets forgotten. And it has decided to forget the parts of the story that make America look bad. Now let me show you why all of this matters right now today in your life. You might be thinking, this is terrible, this is unjust, but it happened over 100 years ago. What does it have to do with me? Everything. It has everything to do with you. Because the theft didn't stop. The betrayal didn't stop. The pattern didn't stop. It just evolved. And if you don't understand how it worked, then you can't see how it's working now. Let's start with the wealth gap. Right now in 2025, the median white household has approximately $284,000 in wealth. The median black household has approximately $44,400. That's a gap of almost $240,000, a ratio of more than 6 to 1. You've heard these numbers before. You've probably heard people try to explain them by talking about education levels, work ethic, family structure, poor choices. Those explanations are lies designed to blame black people for poverty that was created by policy. Here's the real explanation. The Buffalo soldiers who were dishonorably discharged in 1906 lost their pensions. A soldier who served for 20 years would have been entitled to a pension of around $30 a month, about $1,000 in today's money. Over the course of a retirement, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income. But it's not just the pension. It's what that pension could have bought: a home, land, a business, an education for the children, wealth that could be passed down, generational wealth. The dishonorably discharged soldiers got none of that. Their families got none of that. And their descendants that might be, you started from zero when they should have started from wealth. Multiply this across every black veteran who was denied benefits, and you start to see the scope of the theft. After World War I, black veterans were denied access to many of the veteran services and benefits that white veterans received. After World War II, the GI Bill was passed to help veterans buy homes, go to college, and start businesses. It was one of the biggest wealth creation programs in American history, and black veterans were systematically excluded. Banks refused to give them home loans, even with GI Bill guarantees. Colleges refused to admit them. The VA slow-walked their benefit applications or denied them outright. White veterans used the GI Bill to buy homes in new suburbs where property values skyrocketed. Black veterans were left out, and the wealth gap exploded. By one estimate, the exclusion of black veterans from full GI Bill benefits after World War II cost black families over $4 trillion in lost wealth by the year 2020. $4 trillion. That's not ancient history. That's your grandparents' generation. That's why your family rents instead of owns. That's why you don't have generational wealth to fall back on. That's why you're starting from scratch, while white families are starting from inherited homes, inherited stocks, inherited businesses. The theft is ongoing. It's compounding. And it started with moments like Brownsville. Now let's talk about reparations. You've heard the argument against them. Slavery was a long time ago. Nobody alive today was enslaved. We can't hold people responsible for what their ancestors did. It's too expensive. It's divisive. It's impossible to implement. All of these arguments ignore one simple fact. The theft is still happening. It didn't end with slavery. It didn't end with Jim Crow. It's happening now. The Brownsville soldiers were dishonorably discharged in 1906. They were exonerated in 1972. Some of their children are still alive today. The last survivor, Dorsey Willis, didn't die until 1977, just 48 years ago. His children and grandchildren are alive right now. They are owed back pension payments and compensation for the damage done to their family's wealth trajectory. That's not ancient history reparations. That's unpaid wages from 2 generations ago. The same is true for every black veteran who was denied benefits. Every black family who was redlined out of homeownership. Every black community that was destroyed by urban renewal. These policies continued into the 1960s and 1970s. Your parents lived through them. The effects are still being felt. When people say it's too late for reparations, they're lying. It's not too late. The victims and their immediate descendants are still here. The wealth that was stolen is still in the hands of the people who stole it, or their heirs. The debt is real, it's measurable, and it's unpaid. And here's the most important thing to understand. When they say reparations are about slavery, they're trying to make it seem distant and debatable. But reparations aren't just about slavery. They're about Wilmington in 1898. They're about Brownsville in 1906. They're about Elaine in 1919. They're about Tulsa in 1921. They're about redlining in the 1950s and 60s. They're about mass incarceration today. The theft is continuous. The debt is growing. And every year that passes without payment is another year of compounding injustice. Let me connect this to your life right now. If you are a black veteran or the child of a black veteran, this story is your story. Your father or grandfather, who served in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan, faced many of the same obstacles the Buffalo Soldiers faced. Maybe he didn't get dishonorably discharged for something he didn't do, but he probably faced racism from fellow soldiers, was passed over for promotions, had his benefits delayed or denied, came home to a country that still treated him as less than. The pattern continues. Black veterans today have higher rates of homelessness than white veterans. They have lower rates of VA benefit approvals. They receive less disability compensation on average, even for the same injuries. They are more likely to receive other than honorable discharges for minor infractions that white soldiers get warnings for. And those bad paper discharges, just like the Brownsville discharges, cut them off from benefits, from opportunities, from the dignity they earned. The system is still running. The betrayal is still happening. Or maybe you're not a veteran, but you've watched your neighborhood change. You've seen gentrification push your family out of communities you've lived in for generations. You've seen the corner store your grandfather ran get shut down and replaced by a coffee shop you can't afford. You've seen property values rise so fast that longtime residents have to sell and move away. That's not natural market forces. That's the modern version of what happened in Wilmington and Tulsa. When black communities build wealth, the system finds a way to take it back. In the early 1900s, they used mobs and massacres. Now they use zoning laws, tax assessments, and urban development plans. The method changes. The result is the same: displacement, dispossession, theft, or maybe you've had family members caught up in the criminal justice system. Mass incarceration has destroyed black families and communities for the past 50 years. Over 2 million people are in prison right now, a disproportionate number of them black. Many are there for nonviolent offenses that white people commit at the same rates, but don't get arrested for. Once you have a felony conviction, you lose the right to vote in many states. You lose access to public housing. You lose eligibility for many jobs. You're marked for life. It's a modern version of the dishonorable discharge, a legal way to strip away rights and opportunities, to create a permanent underclass, to ensure that even if you serve your sentence, you never fully rejoin society. The tools have changed. The system hasn't. This is why the story of the Buffalo Soldiers matters now, because it shows you that this isn't new. You're not crazy for feeling like the system is rigged against you. It is. It has been for over 150 years. And understanding the history gives you the language to name what's happening, the evidence to prove it's real, and the knowledge that your ancestors survived it, which means you can too. But survival isn't enough. Not anymore. It's time to move from survival to reclamation. It's time to take back what was stolen. And that starts with knowing who you are. You are not victims. You need to hear that first, because the whole system is designed to make you feel powerless. They want you to see stories like Brownsville and Wilmington and Elaine and think they destroyed us. We never had a chance. There's nothing we can do. That's a lie. You are not the descendants of people who were destroyed. You are the descendants of people who survived attempted destruction. There's a difference, a huge difference. Your ancestors were cavalrymen who rode through deserts where the temperature hit 120 degrees in summer and dropped below zero in winter. They slept on the ground with scorpions and rattlesnakes. They went days without water. They fought enemies on all sides, hostile tribes who didn't want them there, white outlaws who saw them as targets, and a command structure that gave them the worst assignments, hoping they would fail. And they didn't fail. They didn't quit. They had the lowest desertion rate in the Army. They stayed. They fought. They won. That strength is in your DNA. Your ancestors built the city of Wilmington. into a model of black political power and economic success. They owned newspapers, held public office, ran businesses. And when a white mob of 2,000 men came to destroy everything they built, some of them fought back. Some of them fired on the mob. Some of them refused to run. They lost that battle, but they fought it. And the ones who survived rebuilt in other cities, started new businesses, raised children who became leaders. That resilience is in your DNA. Your ancestors in Elaine, Arkansas were sharecroppers who decided they were done being cheated. They organized a union. They hired a lawyer. They demanded contracts and fair payment. They knew it was dangerous. They knew the white landowners would retaliate. They did it anyway. They met in a church and planned their strategy even though they knew white supremacists might attack. And when the attack came, they defended themselves. They fired back. They didn't just submit. That courage is in your DNA. And your ancestors, the Buffalo Soldiers of the 25th Infantry, when they were dishonorably discharged for something they didn't do, they didn't accept it quietly. They wrote letters. They filed complaints. They testified before Congress. They fought for 66 years to clear their names. Most of them died before they got justice, but they never stopped fighting. They passed the fight to their children and grandchildren. And eventually the truth came out. That persistence is in your DNA. You are not victims. You are survivors of genocide. You are descendants of warriors. You are heirs to stolen empires. And the poverty you might be experiencing right now is not your fault. It's not because you didn't work hard enough or make the right choices. It's because trillions of dollars were stolen from your family over generations, and you're being told to start from zero and compete with people who are starting from inherited wealth. That's not a fair fight. And the fact that you're still standing, still striving, still building despite all of that makes you stronger than they will ever be. Let me tell you who you are. You are the grandchildren of men who fought for a country that didn't fight for them and still came home with their heads held high. You are the great-grandchildren of women who buried their husbands after massacres and still found the strength to raise their children and teach them pride. You are the descendants of people who had every reason to give up and chose not to. You come from a line of people who were beaten, but not broken, who were suppressed, but not silenced, who were robbed, but not destroyed. That is your inheritance. Not wealth in a bank account they stole that, but something more valuable, unbreakable spirit. And here's what they don't want you to know. That spirit scares them. It always has. That's why they had to dishonorably discharge the Buffalo Soldiers. Not because the soldiers did anything wrong, but because they were too good. They proved that black men could be disciplined, brave, and excellent. They proved that given the chance, black people would excel. That proof was dangerous. It undermined the entire justification for white supremacy. If black soldiers could be heroes, if black communities could be prosperous, if black citizens could govern effectively, then what excuse was left for oppression? None. So the proof had to be destroyed. The soldiers had to be dishonored. The communities had to be burned. The politicians had to be exiled. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded. Your ancestors' excellence was such a threat that it had to be erased from history. Think about the power that represents. You carry that same threat. You carry that same excellence. You carry that same power. And the system knows it. That's why they're still trying to suppress you, still trying to miseducate you, still trying to convince you that you're less than. Because if you ever fully understood who you are and what you're capable of, if you ever fully embraced the legacy of warriors and builders and leaders that you inherited, if you ever unified and demanded what is owed, they know the system couldn't stand against you. That's not rhetoric, that's math. You are the descendants of people who built wealth, from nothing multiple times under the worst conditions imaginable. If you were given reparations, given fair access, given the resources that white families inherited, there would be no stopping you. So when I tell you that you are not victims, I mean it literally. Victims are people who were harmed and couldn't fight back. Your ancestors fought back, every single time. They didn't always win, but they always fought. And you're here because they won enough battles to survive to preserve the bloodline to pass down the story. You are the victory. Your existence is proof that they failed to destroy us. And your rising, your success, your reclamation of what was stolen, that's going to be proof that they will never destroy us. Now let me tell you why this is happening right now. Why you're watching this video today. Why this story is reaching you at this moment in history. Because I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in divine appointment. I believe that God preserved your ancestors through the Middle Passage for a reason. I believe that God brought them through slavery for a reason. I believe that God kept them alive through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, through lynchings and massacres and betrayals for a reason. I believe that God protected them through wars they fought for a country that hated them for a reason. And I believe that God made sure you were born, that you survived, that you are here right now watching this for a reason. That reason is this: you are the generation that's going to break the cycle. You are the generation that's going to demand reparations and get them. You are the generation that's going to teach the true history so thoroughly that they can't erase it again. You are the generation that's going to build wealth and protect it. You are the generation that completes the work they started. God didn't bring you this far to leave you where you are. God didn't preserve this story for over 100 years just so you could learn it and do nothing. This is your assignment. This is your ministry. Your weapon might not be a rifle like the Buffalo Soldiers carried. It might be a vote. It might be a business you build that employs your community. It might be a book you write or a speech you give. It might be a lawsuit you file. It might be the way you raise your children, teaching them the truth so they grow up proud and informed and ready to fight. It might be this conversation you have at the dinner table tonight with your family. Every one of those is a weapon against the system that tried to erase you, and you have a responsibility to use it. If this video has shaken you, if this truth has awakened something in you, if you feel anger rising up and you don't know what to do with it, let me tell you, don't suppress it. Don't calm down. Don't let anyone tell you that you're being too emotional or too angry or too divisive. Your anger is righteous. Your anger is justified. Your anger is the appropriate response to learning that your family was robbed and lied to for generations. The question is not whether you should be angry. The question is what you're going to do with that anger. Are you going to let it consume you, or are you going to let it fuel you? Comment Buffalo below if you're ready to turn that anger into action. Hit that like button if you're done accepting the lies they taught you in school. And share this video with every Black veteran. Every family member who served. Every person who needs to understand that the betrayal didn't start recently and hasn't stopped. This is not optional. This is not entertainment. This is your history. This is your inheritance. And you have a duty to know it and to spread it. Subscribe to this channel because the Buffalo Soldiers are just one chapter. There are Black Marines who integrated the Corps and were still treated as inferior. There are Tuskegee Airmen who flew hundreds of missions and came home to Jim Crow. There are Black nurses who saved lives in World War II and couldn't get jobs in white hospitals when they returned. There are Black chaplains who ministered to dying soldiers and were barred from white churches. Every one of those stories has been suppressed. Every one of those stories is your legacy, and I'm going to tell every single one of them until everyone knows. Tell your children this story. Don't wait for school to teach them because school won't. Don't wait for a museum exhibit because most museums won't show it. Don't wait for a Hollywood movie because Hollywood will soften it if they tell it at all. You tell them. At the dinner table, at bedtime, on the drive to church. Tell them about the Buffalo Soldiers, who had the lowest desertion rate in the Army and were still dishonorably discharged. Tell them about the 66 years it took to clear their names. Tell them about Dorsey Willis weeping at age 86 when he finally got his honor back. Tell them that this is their history. Tell them that they come from warriors. Tell them that they are owed. And tell them that it's their job to demand payment. You have a choice right now. You can close this video and go back to the comfortable lie that everyone was treated fairly, that the playing field is level, that hard work is all it takes to succeed. Or you can accept the truth, accept that the system has been rigged for over 150 years. Accept that your family's poverty is not your fault. Accept that you are owed reparations not as charity, but as payment of a debt. Accept that the fight your ancestors started is not over, and it's your turn to pick up the torch. One path is comfortable. The other path is true. Choose wisely. Because your children are watching, your ancestors are watching, and God is watching. What are you going to do with what you now know? Father God, we come before you with heavy hearts and righteous anger. We thank you for preserving this truth through generations of suppression and lies. We thank you for the Buffalo Soldiers, for the men of the 9th and 10th Cavalry, and the 24th and 25th Infantry, who served with honor even when honor was denied to them. We thank you for Henry Flipper, who endured West Point and still graduated. We thank you for John Alexander, who led with compassion. We thank you for Emmanuel Stance, who charged into battle outnumbered and won. We thank you for the 106 men who were dishonorably discharged in Brownsville and never stopped fighting to clear their names. We pray for justice, Lord. Justice for those men who died dishonored. Justice for their families who lived in poverty because pensions were stolen. Justice for Dorsey Willis, who waited 86 years to hear that he was innocent. We pray for the restoration of what was taken. Not just honor, though that matters. Not just recognition, though, that's owed. But wealth, reparations, payment of the debt that this nation has refused to pay for generations. We ask that you move in the hearts of people in power to do what is right. And if they will not, we ask that you move in the hearts of your people to demand it. We pray for awakening. Awaken every person who watches this video to the truth of their history. Awaken them to their identity as descendants of warriors. Awaken them to their responsibility to fight for justice. Strengthen those who already know and are already fighting. Bless those who are teaching this history to the next generation. Vindicate those who have been silenced, erased, or ignored. And give us, all of us, the courage to speak truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs us something, even when the system pushes back. We declare that the cover-up is over. We declare that the lies will no longer stand. We declare that our ancestors will be honored, our history will be taught, and our inheritance will be reclaimed. We declare that we are not victims, but victors. We are not broken, but unbreakable. We are not begging for a seat at the table. We built the table. We defended the house. We are taking back what is ours. In the name of Jesus, the one who said the truth will set you free. We pray. Amen. Walk in truth. Demand justice. Honor their service. Remember the betrayal and the bravery. You are a child of warriors. You are the heir to stolen wealth. You are a carrier of unbreakable spirit. Act like it. Build like it. fight like it. Because your ancestors didn't survive genocide just so you could live small. They survived so you could rise. So rise. And don't stop until the debt is paid and the truth is known by everyone. Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep demanding reparations, and keep honoring the warriors who came before you.